Hi, I'm Dr. Shores, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the term Anglo-Saxon. Some of you may have heard the term, and for some it may be new. Anglo-Saxon is usually meant to denote the language, peoples, and culture of England, of what we now call England. After 410, which is after the fall of Rome, and before 1066, which is the Norman invasion. This is especially important to understand now for two reasons. The first is this. There is a narrative, an explicit narrative in the acts and beliefs of white radicals, of white supremacists, of white nationalists, who are using this false myth of an Anglo-Saxon identity to persuade people that there's like this pure Germanic race. Another reason is because we are thankfully in a season of historical study and a season of historical introspection. And in order for us to really understand the history of America, we actually have to really understand the usage of this term Anglo-Saxon, because as it turns out, a lot of folks were really invested in this myth, and that includes people like Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so the story goes that in 410, when Rome withdrew from Britain, there was this massive power vacuum, and the Britons who were left there were just like flailing about and had no sense of what to do. And there was something called the Adventus Saxonum, right? The coming over of the Saxons. And that is meant to imagine the idea that 3 or 4 tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Frisians, came over en masse between the 5th and 7th centuries, and that they basically took over Britain and made it into this like pure, this like genetically pure Germanic thing. Now, the reason we've thought this is because of 2 medieval historians. Their names are Bede, B-E-D-E, and Gildas, G-I-L-D-A-S. And through them, we hear about these kind of like marauding, basically proto-Vikings, who come over to the British Isles and basically take over. But we now know that that might not have been the case. And let me tell you why this matters. One reason is because of Thomas Jefferson. Now, he was a big Anglo-Saxonist, right? He was really, really interested in medieval history, and that is beyond England too. Like he read the Quran, he studied Islam, and he was also really, really invested in this myth of the Anglo-Saxons. And in fact, he was so interested in it that he even saw the American project, right? The project of leaving England and their like faulty system and starting over as an extension of this Adventus Saxonum. And one way we know he thought that is from his letters and from his diaries. Another way we know is because he wanted, and this is true, he wanted the American seal, the seal of the brand new country, to have a picture of Hengist and Horsa. And those were like the 2 main guys of the Adventus Saxonum. So can you believe that? So this man who purportedly wants to start afresh and leave everything of past England behind is actually so invested in this racialized myth, in this genetic myth of the conquering Germanic tribes, that he wants to bring that over to America. And we see how that can be extended through in narratives like Westward Expansion and Manifest Destiny. Those were not incidentally racist. Those were explicitly motivated by the language and the mythology of this conquering Germanic race. So understanding the term Anglo-Saxon and all it could mean and all that it was and all that it is actually vitally important to understanding our history as Americans. So now we're going to talk about why we have this myth and what's happening now that's helping us reevaluate the truth of it. So once upon a time, right, there were two authors. One named Gildas, Gildas. He's a Welshman, not an Englishman. That's really important. Bede, Bede, he's sometimes called the Venerable Bede, was an Englishman. And both of them wrote about this Adventus Saxonum, this coming over of the Saxons, this arrival, as if it were kind of like one coordinated group. They also wrote about it in terms of like complete upheaval, right? That these German tribes were somehow like taking over. We're learning now that that just isn't true, and actually that we have assumed stuff about these texts that we shouldn't have. Here's why. Archaeology and isotopic evidence are showing us that actually there was a lot of movement around the North Sea and around the English Channel before, during, and after the fall of Rome. What that means is that for the most part, actually, we're able to determine that the movements between Northwest Europe and Britain were pretty sustained, right? Was there a lot of trade? Yes. Was there a lot of immigration? Yes. There was also a ton of adaptation and inclusion. And here's how we know that. Burials. Let me tell you something. In recent studies of burials, we have unearthed folks who are buried in the exact same direction, in the exact same posture, with the exact same grave goods. And the only way we could distinguish native Britons from immigrants is by doing isotopic analysis of their teeth enamel. We need to decentralize history. And one of the best places to start that is in the Middle Ages, because they are not this, 1200 years of the Middle Ages is not like a holding pattern. It's not like, oh, there was good ancient stuff and then the Renaissance, which like introduced stuff like burning witches. So let's not pretend the Renaissance was like some magical time. It's 1,000 years. It's 1,000 years of history. And we cannot say that it's all the same, and we cannot say that it's all bad. What we can say is that we need to understand it. And I want y'all to know that I'm here for that. Thanks for watching.